Next up, watched some movies recently. Oh, this isn't the first one. Oh, it is. Okay. Black Widow. Finally saw this. I've been wanting to see this since it came out over a year ago, I think. It's kind of Black Widow's a little bit of her backstory mixed with more current things. So it picks up in a small town in Ohio in the must have been the 80s or something like that, where I forget his name, Stolenkov, something like that, and Melina. They are two Russian covert agents. He's a subject of the Russian super soldier program, like Captain America was the U.S., so he's got this super strength. And then Melina is one of the Black Widows, so she's been trained to be an assassin and all that stuff. And they're trying to get some intel in the U.S., and with them are their two daughters, Natasha Romanoff, Black Widow, and her younger sister, Yelena Belova, who's super hot. That's a good pair. So they suddenly, one night, the dad comes home and he's like, we gotta go. So they make this hasty retreat back to Russia with some sort of intel in hand, and they get back to their boss named Dreykov. He sends the super soldier guy, I forget his name, to a prison and sedates the two young girls, puts them in the takes them to the Red Room to put them in the Black Widow program further and get them fully trained up. So eventually, though, Black Widow defected and went to S.H.I.E.L.D. In the current times, the story picks up after the whole Sokovia Accords, where the Avengers kind of split, and the ones that aren't following the rules are being hunted down by S.H.I.E.L.D. and other authorities. So she's kind of on the run. She's in Norway and stuff like that. But in the meantime, her younger sister Yelena has been in contact with a Black Widow, and in the process of tracking her down has to kill her, but from her body takes this vial of red, this collection of red vials that she then uses to like de-brainwash one of the other Black Widows. It's like an antidote to their psychic training of being a Black Widow, and she says, you're free now, whatever. So she then sends these vials to Natasha in Norway, and then goes and hunkers down in Budapest or something like that. So Natasha, laying low in Norway, finds these vials and is like, oh, what is this? Finds they come from Budapest. She ends up going to Budapest after being tracked by this special hunter-killer person that is used to bring in rogue Black Widow agents. So eventually the scene shifts to Budapest, where the sisters link up after so long apart, and the whole rest of the movie is for them to try and kill Dreykov, who wasn't killed earlier before the movie when Natasha and Hawkeye thought they had killed him and his daughter. So their mission is to kill Dreykov for good this time, as well as use these vials to de-brainwash all of the other widows and set them free, sort of thing. So that's where the action goes, and I'm not going to tell you what happens because it's a pretty cool movie. It didn't receive as high of ratings as a lot of the other Marvel movies do, but I don't know why, because I enjoyed every second of it. It was a really neat movie, and nice to see some of her backstory, because she is a fascinating character. Next up, I don't have a cover for this. We went to see this on Father's Day, and it is none other than Jurassic World Dominion. In Jurassic World Dominion, it takes place 4 years after Fallen Kingdom, so the whole estate thing where all the dinosaurs got loose. So the dinosaurs are out in the world now. They're living in the world. Things have obviously changed. People have had to adapt. Lots of people are getting killed because, well, there's fucking dinosaurs in the world now. And it's become a new landscape. So Owen Grady is living on his ranch up in buttfuck somewhere in the States, and is doing a job of kind of wrangling rogue dinosaurs and then relocating them to a better place, while Claire Deering, who lives with Owen, is working for this little group, this little cell that investigates improper breeding facilities for the dinosaurs and kind of deals with them in a shady kind of way. And with them at the ranch, of course, is Maisie, the young girl who was cloned and is obviously an important person for what she is, and they don't want her getting loose, and anybody who might nefariously want to study her or whatever to get their hands on her. So she's not allowed to go too far from the shack and whatever. But of course, being a young kid, she does just that, and eventually some biosyn agents pick up on her location and kidnap her, as well as Blue, the raptor that lives nearby, somehow has a baby, which Maisie nicknames Beta, and they kidnap it too because it's also a fascinating study. Somehow this raptor bred, so they want to have a look at this new baby raptor. So biosyn, if I don't know if you remember this, but in the original Jurassic Park from 1993, biosyn is the competing bioengineering company to InGen, that Nedry was trying to get the Barbasol, the embryos, out to Louis Dodgson, to biosyn, so they could steal those embryos. And that's who Dodgson is. That's who the main villain in this movie is Dodgson, the leader of biosyn. And he's claiming he's got this wildlife preserve with dinosaurs somewhere in a remote portion of part of Italy, and he's claiming they're doing all this studying where they're using the dinosaurs to create new medicines and blah blah blah, all this noble stuff. But Ellie Sattler is called to investigate a locust infestation somewhere in Texas, I think it was, and they're huge. They're just monsters, and they're destroying all the crops. And she checks it out and goes like, what the hell is going on here? And she's like, well, why didn't they eat those crops? And the farmer's like, oh, they use biosyn seed. So then she notices the locusts don't eat any crops that are engineered with a biosyn seed. So she's like, biosyn. So then she enlists Alan Grant, who they haven't seen each other for a while, you know the history there, to help her out and go to biosyn and kind of covertly investigate and try and get some evidence on biosyn creating this kind of locust plague to try and profit on, only biosyn seed working, right? So you see Sattler and Grant head to biosyn for their reasons, and then you see Owen and Claire head to biosyn for their reasons. And so everything happens, culminates in Italy as the biosyn facility is kind of infiltrated by these different parties and that are working against biosyn for different aims, but ultimately the same overall kind of reason. And chaos ensues, of course, and the whole movie, there's lots of dinosaurs doing dinosaur things and heroes doing hero things. And also Jeff Goldblum is back as Ian Malcolm, and he actually is doing a lecture series at biosyn. So he's kind of, Ellie Sattler's kind of in, and how she found out some evidence on biosyn. She got help from Malcolm. So it all culminates in this big action-packed finale at the biosyn facility, and it was so good, I want to go see it again before it's out of theaters. So that's just my opinion. People probably hated it because people hate things nowadays. Jurassic World probably isn't woke enough for them. Last up, another movie, and this is taking us back a ways into yesteryear. I used to watch this movie a ton as a kid, and it is called Cannonball Run. I love vehicle movies when I was a kid, and I still do. This is a star-studded cast from 1981, and it's basically just a bunch of people racing from, I think, New Jersey or Connecticut or something to the California coast to see who can be the fastest one to do it, and then they win a bunch of money or some shit. So it's just the story of all these different crews as they journey across the states. And it's got Burt Reynolds, Farrah Fawcett, Dom DeLuise, Terry Bradshaw, Sammy Davis Jr., Roger Moore, Dean Martin. Who else? There's a bunch of other people too. There's lots of people. It's just a goofy comedy. And Burt Reynolds is kind of the main guy, I guess you'd say. So a lot of the action is focused on his team, who is driving an ambulance and trying to get not pulled over by cops by having the ambulance cherries and being like, oh no, they're just got a patient to go to the hospital, right? So each team has their strategy and whatever. Like there's two sexy broads that drive a Lamborghini Countach, and of course they get pulled over by the cops, so zip down goes the shirt, right? So they all have their own their fancy vehicle or whatever kind of vehicle they're using to try and scheme their way over there, and as well as their strategy, right? So it's just a really goofy movie, full of slapstick, full of ridiculousness, and being from the early 80s, like safety and that sort of thing is not a concern, right? Like Terry Bradshaw and his buddy that were driving like a NASCAR kind of stock car. They're like, "You ready for the trip?" "Yeah, I got all the beer." So they're like loading cases of Budweiser into the back of this stock car and drinking it as they drive. So it's just like, it's such a different era, like, just like the 70s and 80s, right? Like, we're just so different to how things are now. It's kind of refreshing in a way. I mean, I don't condone drinking and driving, obviously, but that kind of ridiculous humor, right? Like, I can imagine people being like, "Oh, you can't do that now." Well, again, they're not woke, right? Yeah, it was 45 fucking years ago or whatever it was, right? So, but just a really, really, sorry, I'm on a woke tirade lately. I just can't stand it. I can't stand the way the world is now. It's redonkulous. But anyways, if you want some classic 80s slapstick, stupid, goofy comedy. Oh, Jackie Chan, a young Jackie Chan is in it as well. There's so much hilarity in this movie. And I didn't know if James was going to like it, because 80s movies can sometimes, even though they were awesome at the time, they can seem slow compared to, new movies and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, I don't know if he's going to like this. And he fucking laughed, and he laughed, and I laughed, and I laughed. So I'm glad he liked it. So I can't wait to, I've been thinking of 80s movies that I haven't watched in a long time, and trying to obtain some of those. So I've got a few. We got a couple more coming, so you'll see those in the near future. But this one was a total hit. All these years later, still a masterpiece. So until next time, don't stay woke.